to the T-roh Show. Transmitting truth one week at a time.
Welcome to the 51st broadcast of the T-roh Show. This is your host, Keith.
Good afternoon. This is Stu. Nice to be with you.
All right, folks, we've got some good news here. We've gotten a few, I can say a few. We do get this quite often, but we normally don't advertise it, but we wanted to bring it out, this particular one out today. And keep in mind that these things take time for things to happen. So it's just been reported that David, I won't put out his full name, he was an American national, was picked up a couple of weeks ago based upon 2 warrants for arrest for outstanding traffic tickets. He provided his American national status, to the local authorities, and they dismissed the credentials as fraudulent. After interviews regarding status, David was ultimately detained for psychiatric evaluation. I think he was in there about 2 weeks, right? He's supposed to be in there for 21 days. The PAGs presented the paperwork to the governor of Massachusetts. Soon after, it was reported to the Secretary of State for this government that the doctor in charge was also in a receipt of the paperwork, possibly sent from the governor, to which it was also reported to the SOS was laughed at by the doctor. A hearing was already scheduled for Monday. That was yesterday. The American national was released Monday, all charges dismissed. Okay, we just wanted to put a shout out to the PAGs for what they did. That's the private attorney generals across America. And people used to make fun of them when they were, the PAGs were associating themselves with the government of the United States of America.
Sure did.
And we'd like to put a thanks, shout out to the governor of Massachusetts. We do appreciate your assistance in this matter, and hope to enhance a better relationship in the future. So that being said, we just wanted to let you know that the locals, okay, on a international and national level, we normally do not have problems. It's the locals that we have problems with. And we'll, I'll give you a scenario why. Most of those people have not been out of the county that they were born in, or they'd never been out of the state they were born in. So they were raised in the schools, never taught any international relations or international law whatsoever. Never even heard of the law of nations. They would tell you that the law of nations are nations that pass laws. That's what they would think it is. They wouldn't know it was a book. And I'm just reporting it here. This is what we deal with on a daily basis, especially with locals.
Yeah, I think it's evident that the local level, even upper local level management, and I mean management of authority figures, they're left in the dark. They're left in the dark.
They have no freaking clue what self-determination is.
Mm-hmm.
They would have no idea that they could actually start their own town.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. That never would ever occur to them that
Mm-hmm.
they could actually do that.
Yeah.
And it's people that do understand the international law and the creating of new towns or new cities or things like that do pretty much control them to a level. They're lied to a lot, but it's because they just don't understand. You can't. So that's kind of what you're dealing with on a local level. So we always get stupid stuff from local level is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, but you can't heap all the blame on the local level because, chain of authority dictates that the higher up should be educating, training these folks to understand what's going on. Of course, with that, anybody that's familiar with what's been going on in the last 4, 6, 8 months realizes now that the levels of corruption within the United States is just, staggering. So it's no wonder that there's communication breakdowns occurring, within those chains of authority.
Exactly. We do. There's the Masons have been busy little bees. They really have. They've been funding this thing called Common Purpose, and we'll get into that next week as far as Common Purpose is concerned, and what these kind of. Well, I can tell you this: Common Purpose is just basically a corporation has gotten into everything. It's almost like a virus getting into your computer. They get into everything, and they cripple a country. That's why Sweden's going through what they're going through, and England is going. It's really big in England, and it's big here, in this country. And what they do is they somehow in their head they've got the locals believing that it's okay for Common Purpose to claim the jurisdiction, that there's no one in between the private sector and the public. There's no one there to speak, no one there to talk and everything else. And I know that's a scam, because how do I know that? It's the post office. The general post office is supposed to be between the people and the public and private sector. That's why the general post office has both jurisdictions. And so what they've done is the Common Purpose has come in and they've claimed the post office jurisdiction. And who would know that they're writing on the UPU, which is the Universal Postal Union? That the Universal Postal Union is not doing anything about this organization called Common Purpose, even though they're stepping all over their union.
I wonder why.
And that's why we basically told UPU, stick it. We don't want anything to do with you, with the General Post Office in the United States of America. You guys, you got problems in your organization, in your union, big time.
Yeah, I mean, didn't we communicate to them that until we see that they started cleaning their act up,
Yeah.
Y'all
got to clean it up over there. So, and the whole thing is when Common Purpose is doing this, it makes UPU liable for sedition and or what do you call it? That's not necessarily sedition. It would be what's the term for that? Espionage. In all countries, and spying and these things, using the UPU, the Universal Postal Union, to do that.
Right, because communications.
Yeah, they've allowed Common Core to come in and take over the communications between the private and public sector. So Common Core within each country, and anybody that joins it, is actually trespassing on the postal service and the General Post Office and everybody else in the postal industry. And that's called sedition and treason, folks. And you've got, what they call high level. I don't call them high level. They're just freaking guys in there that were thrown in there. And politicians and stuff like that, they call themselves, but they're actually private companies. And they go in there and they start doing the bidding of Common Core, or Common Purpose. So start looking up Common Purpose. It's a hell of a thing. I mean, it's amazing what these people are doing, and they're getting away with. And they've been thrown out of a couple of countries so far because they just tear the country to pieces. They put incompetent people in charge of areas, and when they screw everything up, they get promoted.
Sounds like stuff we've been covering for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's just bad, man. It really is bad. But didn't you have something on the history? Yeah, some history of where this is coming from and what people are dealing with today is nothing new.
Yeah, we've been touching on the Knights Templar, the Masonic lodges, the last few shows, and I thought I'd just I ran across a piece middle of last week or so, and I just compiled a few quotes. I thought I'd run them by folks.
All right,
just give me a moment to screen share.
But yeah, watch out for Common Purpose, folks. Common Purpose. They are a nasty, nasty organization, and they have some. They've even allowed. I think we'll do a report next week. I think it was 23,000 private contractors that have been deputized by people that are connected with Common Core in the FBI. So they've infiltrated the FBI. That's why they won't go after Clinton. So they've infiltrated all that. It's called Common Core. It's being funded by the Masonic Lodge and through their banks. And they just, I think it's 22,000 deputized FBI agents that have the authority to shoot to kill. And it was all done under Obama. Or most of it was done under Obama.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the what I've got is just there's probably 7 little excerpts from this book here, Pedophilia in the Empire, Satan, Sodomy, and the Deep State. These specific these specific excerpts are from Chapter 4, the Secret Military Order of the Templar Knights, Satan-worshipping pedophiles. In 2001, previously misfiled documents known as the Shinen Parchment were uncovered within the Vatican archives by Vatican medieval paleographer Barbara Frail, who authored a book published a decade later divulging the full story about the controversial secret order. And this represents the footnotes that are used within the book. Already in this is a little bit of history. Already in deep debt to Templar loans for waging protracted war against rival England, France's King Philip, whose most recent requests for credit had been soundly rejected in 1307, felt so threatened by the Templars that he sent a dozen spies to infiltrate the order to gather sufficient evidence to end up justifying a Friday, the 13th of October arrest of 2,000 knights in France for heresy based on uncovered sexual debauchery and betrayal of the Roman Catholic Church. This is, by the way, just a fun fact. This is where Friday the 13th comes from. The recent evidence shows, and the recent evidence that this book is referring to is the Frail, the Shinen Parchment that was referenced earlier. The recent evidence shows that a second confession of crimes was obtained through the Pope's inquiry while Templars were not under duress or torture. Many writers, both Catholics and Masons, have always insisted that the first confession of debauchery and demonic worship was obtained through torture and therefore false. So this Friday the 13th was a roundup of Knights Templar folks, including the Grand Master, and the myths related to it purport to that the confessions were under duress, but this new parchment reveals that in fact it wasn't. Reading back here, but the Vatican scholar who wrote the recent book unveiling the papal discovery confirmed the homosexual and pedophiliac practices as well as the idol worship of Baphomet. Yet Frail's media spun press conferences misleadingly minimize these depravities. So we've got control of the press here, misleading and minimizing the activities of the Freemasons. The Templars had gone both gay and astray, far away from their Christian God, just as so many Catholic priests have historically followed suit to this day. Child sexual abuse committed by Dark Age Catholic priests, let me scroll, and monks was rather commonplace. Vatican archives confirm the church has been covering up priestly child rapists since the early days of the Middle Ages. Peasant children were known to be sodomized and then found crucified in the fields or by the road, perpetrated by frocked pedophilic murderers, purposely set up for local Jews to be falsely blamed for engaging in blood sacrifice discussed in the previous chapter. The Templars and its secret occult ideology firmly took root in Scotland and evolved into the Freemasons, also covered in the last chapter. Okay. So what have we got? You know, I'm showing you the folks here that we've got the Knights Templar evolved into the Freemasons. It's basically the same organization. Friday the 13th roundup that is often downplayed, okay, as false confessions is confirmed, in fact, by this new Shinnon parchment that was discovered in 2001. Okay, so this stuff is real. It's occurring. I'm going to stop screen sharing and pull up one more thing for you.
Well, wait a minute. It was misfiled.
Yeah, right. Misfiled. You know,
they just misfiled that.
Yeah, and we've, you know, you and I have talked about on the t-roh show about, you know, one of the objectives is that they've been, you know, running around grabbing everybody's literature, so nobody knows the true history. Wouldn't it be tremendous if somebody could get into the Vatican Library?
Yeah, you know? This is a lot of it here. They've got it, so it's happening. There's Gaga and there's Beyonce.
Yep.
And there's Madonna. This is what they've been pushing.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it everywhere if you just go to the internet. I mean, it's easy to find. You've got even all the way back to Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah,
and
look at Obama.
You got it here, Obama. You know,
yeah,
it's then
exactly.
there's Sammy Davis there with these.
You can also
Church of Satan.
I noticed. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I noticed the picture of the Pope, former Pope there. You can also Google. I just did that probably an hour ago, just for ha-has. Pope as Mason, or Pope is a Mason, and you can find lots of articles that show that the current Pope is part of the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah, and then you know, if you see the eyes there, it tells you what they do to people. How messed up they are. Mm-hmm. They really screw them up. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to add anything to your little screen share here. This is the book that I just pulled the thing from, and I'll pull up a second page here. Grand Lodge of Scotland. Okay, still exists. Big bad website. Okay, a lot of false history, of course. A lot of inconsistencies. You know, one of the pages within the within this website talks about the idea of pursuing truth, and yet, you know, they're a secret society. How do you base a secret society upon ultimate truth? So, you know, and here's that parchment, the Shinnon parchment.
And now they're doing business as Common Purpose. Same type of organization.
Yeah, and this is the Grand Master that was involved in the October 13th, Friday the 13th roundup. Jacques de la Mallet.
Okay, and everybody's probably wondering, do you have any more on this?
Nope. I just wanted to really show that the parchment is, in fact, you know, does exist.
Okay. And people wondering how they actually operate in the United States. And when I say in the United States, I mean District of Columbia, Manhattan Island. How they operate there. By the way, all mortgages and anything all go through the Bank of New York Mellon, every single one of them. just to let everyone know that that has been proven. I'm not going to be showing evidence here today, but I'm just reporting it. We also what do you call it, reveals itself as to the locals, and how people actually understand this is we can go through all these, you know, Knights Templars and all that all day long, but how does that translate to you, and how does that affect you in some way? And we're just going to go, and this is in the New York Daily News, and we've gone through this before, but I'm going to go through it one more time because I'm going to give you just a little bit more information on this, but I'm just going to do a quick overview. It says how the 13th Amendment didn't really abolish slavery, but let it live in the U.S. prisons. And it was in a basic amendment that they had in their corporate charter, which is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, and or any other place subject to their jurisdiction. Okay, so when you have that any other place subject to their jurisdiction, this is dealing with people, by the way, not there. It should be its, but it wasn't. It was there. Does that tell you something? When you have the word there, so that's dealing with people there, not it.
Mm-hmm.
This
I noticed
be,
that.
Yeah, this would be considered an entity here, and when you're dealing with entities, you would refer to the entity as its jurisdiction, not there. So there's an issue with that, anyways. Even if the amendment did not have except as punishment for a crime. And as everybody noticed, you notice that everything's a crime now. You spit on the sidewalk, it's a crime. It goes to criminal district court. Nothing really ever goes to any civil court at all. Ever. It seems like everything is a crime. There's a reason for that. When you're called a slave, folks, when you're called a slave, I'm not saying you are one, I'm just saying when you're called a slave, that renders you property. You are literally property. Nothing different than a chair, a television set, a couch. That's what a lot of people have a hard time grasping unless you've gone through it or lived through it. You're nothing more than a toothbrush. That's property. A kitchen sink. Tires on your car. That's property. So when they go into slavery, they said except as a punishment for a crime. No, why put in the exception? Very good reason for that. It's a very good. Slavery has always been extremely profitable. To buy and sell people as property, and to them, we were buying and selling property. They're having a property auction, not a people auction. They're not referred to as people, they're referred to as property. So on paper, it looks legal. They're just having there's nothing wrong with auctioning off property. This is how sick, that what Stu was talking about, how sick these guys are. Some sick puppies. And so when you get convicted of a crime, you're considered property. Now, a lot of people have been doing the research in the CUSIP, under the CUSIP and CUSIP numbers and all that. I can go through this if you'd like, if you really want to just go to the New York Daily News and just put in 13th Amendment didn't really abolish slavery. And you can read the whole thing. They go into very specifics in it. $2 billion a year industry that employs nearly 900,000 prisoners. This is what they do. This is why you have so many more people in prison here in this country than you do combined all over the world. All over the world. All the other, there's 190 something countries, actually 209 of them. There's a lot that aren't listed. And all those countries have their prison population is less combined than in the United States under the Knights Templar, Common Purpose, and the Masons. Okay? Combined, I'm talking about. That's even talk about China and India that have 2 billion people and all this. There are more people in prison here than all over the world combined.
Yeah, and if you consider the fact that the vast majority of Americans are stateless, what have you really got? You've got probably the largest slave plantation that's ever existed in the history of the world.
Exactly. So their free and nearly free labor represents, according to Alice Speary, a $2 billion a year industry that employs nearly 900,000 prisoners, while paying them a few cents an hour in some states and nothing at all in others. In addition to work for private companies, prisoners also clean, cook, and work on maintenance and construction in the prisons themselves, forcing officials to pay staff to carry out those tasks in response to work stoppages. They cannot run these facilities without us. He says organizers wrote ahead of the strike. And this is what the prisoners all started striking. Good for them. We're going to run a strike. Screw you, we're not working. Which really costs the prison system a lot of money. We will not only demand the end in prison slavery, we will end it ourselves by ceasing to be slaves. So you have a prison population that is starting to rise up. Most of them are in there for white collar stuff or whatever. It's nothing. Very few people in there are there for as rapists and murderers and things like that, which I agree they need to be in prison or executed. Either way, you know, if you murder somebody, you need to be executed. You don't need to be sitting in prison for 40 years or the rest of your life. Just get it over with. Do unto others, you know, that kind of thing. But they, you know, it's really bad. And so they left it in what the company called its 13th Amendment. And so slavery by the Republicans and Democrats, you know, the Republicans coming out and charging that the Democrats wanted slavery and the Republicans didn't. I'm sorry, guys, both of you did.
Yeah. Heads and tails of the same coin.
Yeah, I mean, come on, don't sit there and say that you guys abolished slavery. That is an absolute false claim. You didn't abolish anything. So this is basically what they do. You're in there, you're in the, what I call a warehouse as property. It's called a private detention center. Has anybody noticed that they don't have any taxes for the private detention centers in your electric bill, phone bill, or anything else? Nobody is paying for that. It's not anywhere. Go look at all your taxes and see if there's anything for detention centers or private prisons or the prison system or a prison association or whatever the hell it is. There's nothing there. It's because it's not necessarily a detention center. It's more of a warehouse. Okay. So you have property in a warehouse. So this is what this is what they do. That is property. That property can be mortgaged. They can borrow money off of that property, using that property as a collateral for the mortgage. And it's translated to people as you're the surety when you're being held as surety for something. Okay, so that's what that being held for surety of something is saying. Your property, we're going to mortgage you. They use that money to invest in stocks that they get from the stock tips that they get from the state legislatures, because the state legislatures know which statute they're about to pass that's going to affect a certain industry where the stocks are low. So they invest, and this is all done through trusts and things like that, all private trusts. It's the paper trail is a freaking nightmare. Okay, but from certain testimonies and things like that we've been getting, this is how they're doing it. So they get the stock tips. So the prison system and the courts all get their money. They borrow credit off of it. They do fines and things like that as kind of a front. And the private trust will use the property in the detention center / warehouse. They use them as they mortgage that. They go and invest in these stocks. Those stocks go through the roof. They pay the mortgage back, and they're all making money. Because if you got a stock tip coming from a state legislature that's saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this, this, and this, and it's going to affect this particular industry, you might want to buy stocks in this now while they're at $1 a stock, because they're going to be worth 99 here in just a little while once we pass the statute. So it's all what they call, and for the lack of better terms, a grand network of money and power and systems and all that kind of thing, using people, calling them U.S. citizens and all this other stuff. and telling them that they have a citizenship when in fact they don't have an oath or affirmation. And it really helped the PAGs, going back to the David issue, that he had an oath and affirmation to something.
Oh, I think it was critical.
Imperative.
Yeah. I think it was critical.
Because when you have an oath and affirmations to something, international law kicks in. If you don't have an oath or affirmation, you're going to be stuck under the pretended, domestic that was created by the Masons themselves. Now, domestic is considered a plantation. That's how it works. So it helps quite a bit when somebody has an oath or affirmation, because international law kicks in, international human rights kick in, all these things kick in that protect this people from stuff like this happening to them. People getting their children taken. I mean, I'm getting reports from a lot of different areas that they're taking children, they're severing the parents' rights and all this other stuff. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of
these guys are getting away with,
Yeah, and for some of the folks that are new to these concepts, it's kind of like if you were a hunter, it's kind of like the scenarios where you would hunt in a jungle, and hey, it's kill or be killed, and you're out there, and there's nothing, there's no regulations or anything. Or you have a nationality, now the hunter's placed on a plantation and things are regulated, they can do and can't do particular things, et cetera, et cetera. As a quick little analogy to help people understand the importance of a nationality.
Exactly. It allows others to restrict your right to own property. We addressed that in the Reign of the Heaven Society post the other day. This goes all the way back. I mean, it was ugly. 1619, 1865. There was a lot of slavery going on. It was really, really bad. But they said, oh, we abolished it, and they actually didn't. They didn't abolish anything. I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about here as far as property is concerned. We cover it in the Reign of the Heaven Society post. And we also have that gender identity and perpetual surveillance, that kind of thing. We can go over that. It's okay. First of all, when you have somebody saying that marijuana is illegal in the federal level and that there's 29 states that passed it, that's just a scam. It was those same 29 states all go to Washington, D.C. to pass federal laws. So why would they vote for one law to make it illegal and another law to say is legal? I mean, seriously, it's all the same people. This is the stage thing that everybody was taught, to believe that somehow federal is different and all that, unless you're dealing with a private company on Manhattan Island and they're foreigners. Oh well, let's see what happens. But at the same time, people have been conditioned through ATF that you cannot own automatic weapons. Well, that's a violation of Article 17. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. So if you have a right to own property, why you've been conditioned to believe that, oh, well, it's illegal for me to own an automatic weapon. Well, how is it illegal to own its property? You can own property. Everyone has the right to own property. But you see the conditioning that people are put through.
Great example.
Right. I mean, think of it this way. Why is it that a private company doing business as what they call a federal government able to own plutonium, but nobody else can? Plutonium is property. How is it that one country can own plutonium, but another one can't? That's conditioning, folks. That's how they condition people. Well, we don't want to own it because it's dangerous. Well, you own it. Why isn't it dangerous for you to own it?
You guys are confirmed psychopaths.
And freaking pedophiles and everything else. You own the crap. So how is it that it's okay for you to own something and nobody else? And believe me, I'm not advocating for what North Korea is doing. Okay. However, if you're going to go after North Korea, go after them for the right reason. Okay. So, I mean, if they're going to be, you know, oh, it's because he has nuclear weapons. Well, they have a right to own property. It's a universal right. So they can own property if they want to own property. It's not going to hurt anybody. Now, throwing missiles over countries, yeah, that's a different story. But that's just terrorism. But not because the man has nuclear weapons. It's because he's using it for the purpose of terrorism. And by the way, how many missiles have been shot over countries before by other countries below? And why wasn't that called terrorism? I mean, think about it. There's a double standard here. So this was a story about a Susan Ballard of Honolulu, Hawaii. She sends this letter over to all these people, and she says, "This letter is to inform you that under the provisions of the Hawaii revised statutes, you are disqualified from firearm ownership, possession, or controlling firearms. Your medical marijuana use disqualifies you from ownership of firearms and ammunition." Seriously? This is not about, the whole gun grab, folks, is not about guns. It's about property ownership. That's all it's about. And when you get rid of property ownership, you now have a communist state where the state owns everything. And what do? They use those resources against the people that they just took it from. It's like somebody walking up to you, grabbing a hammer out of your hand and hitting you with it. And then making the excuse, well, you were going to use that hammer for something dangerous. When in fact, the guy that took it and hit you with it, he used it for something dangerous and projected that on you. That's all it is. It's just sick. So this woman, Susan Ballard, more than likely a part of Common Purpose, by the way, is caused herself all kinds of problems. Because the committee finds that the arbitrary notice of the contents thereof issued by the police chief Susan Ballard of Honolulu, Hawaii, is nothing more than a political ploy on behalf of a foreign country to enforce the laws of a foreign country in an effort to change the political structure of the state of Hawaii into a communist and or socialist failure without the vote of the people. And the reason why we call that is because in the story and dealing with this, they said that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals wholeheartedly upheld what Susan Ballard was saying because people that were taking marijuana were not in their right mind. Well, I beg to differ. The people that are in that court are not in their right mind, saying that other people are not in their right mind. And we have reason to believe that that's absolutely true. That's not an opinion. So here's the issue. Somebody has made this actually, what do you call it? Okay in their heads that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is under the Universal Charter of the Judge, derived from the Foreign Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. We have the link here proving it. And therefore, any decision coming from any so-called federal judiciary under the aforementioned foreign entity would be without jurisdiction to decide anything outside the metes and bounds of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. And this Equestrian Order is a city-state that was created by the Vatican that resides right next to the Vatican in a building, and they called it a city-state. Okay, so the Equestrian Order doesn't want your guns. They want your right to own guns. They want your right to own property. They're just using guns as the excuse to take away your right to own property. Makes it easier if you're convicted for a crime to make you property when you don't own any property. See, if you go into a court and you don't have the right to own property, it's very easy to transfer that to you're not being able to. There's no fine line of slavery going on there. There's no fine line. So if you're not owning property, you're not able to own property, then you can become property very easily.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar principle to if we're talking about guns. If you're a gun owner but you have no ammunition, kind of defeats the purpose.
Right. So they use Susan Ballard, who's not very bright at all, by the way, to be even signed a letter like that, is nothing more than a political ploy, is what we're talking about, and it's on behalf of a foreign country, which is the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. It says, therefore, the notice is null and void for sedition against the principles of the law of nations. And no, the law of nations is not a body of law created by a nation. Willful oppression against her constituency, the people she voted her in, on behalf of a foreign country, and opens for suit against the police chief Susan Ballard of Honolulu, Hawaii, for violating the most basic human right to own property. The aforementioned human right says nothing about the right of any international entity to restrict anyone from owning certain types of property. Because guess what? The Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem are subject to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, whether you guys like it or not. You're subject to it. So the aforementioned human right has always been and has been based on the fact that the human right is absolute, so long as the exercise thereof does not violate the human right of another. So if you want to have an M1 Abrams tank in your backyard, you can have one as long as you don't blow somebody's house up. That's property. Why couldn't you own one?
Makes sense to me.
It's not a big deal.
Nope.
Okay, and so these cops going into homes and seeing these arsenals and everything, that's somebody's property. As long as the guy's not doing anything with it, because there are some guys that just like to collect stuff. They think they're cool, and it makes them feel cool. And when they have parties and things, they show their buddies all their stuff, and this, it's cool. They're not really intending to hurt anybody with it, but still, it doesn't really matter if they're intending or not intending. He has the right to own it, and no one can go in and arbitrarily take that right. And that's the way it works. Because what's getting ready to happen is what they're trying to do is they're trying to take the guns from anybody who's not a part of the Masonic Lodge or the Papists. That's what the Pope is trying to do. He's been doing it for centuries, over and over and over and over. They did it in England. They did it in Scotland. They did it everywhere. They tried to arm their own Masonic members and disarm everybody else.
Yeah, that's the Knights Templar is a military order.
Mm-hmm. So here's something that a lot of locals don't think about. It says the state of Hawaii revised statutes violate basic human rights, and this is why it's so easy to do, because why? She's local. She'll fall into this every single time. This is the biggest ploy. Probably have never even heard of the Equestrian Order. She just she just saw the revised statute and said, "Oh, well, I guess that's what I have to do because that's my duty. I took my oath." You see, that's why locals are not really respected much, because they don't think outside the box. They don't understand what's really happening to them, and they're so easily manipulated. It's unbelievable. So that revised statute, okay, is as if the state of Hawaii revised statutes violate basic human rights. That revised statute would be rendered an unlawful order. And Susan Ballard does have the right to refuse to follow or enforce said order. Why? Because if it's an unlawful order violating human rights, Susan Ballard has the right to protect herself from an international crime. And basically give the people that are giving her that order the finger. You want to do it, you do it. Here's your badge, go screw yourself. You want to get involved in international crimes? You do it, you little freaking coward. No, you want somebody else to do it because you're a coward.
Right. Well,
You don't have enough guts to do it yourself.
Right. Well, they stand in behind the curtain.
Yeah. It says the intangible property right to self-defense is absolute, and the exercise thereof does not violate the human rights of others. Okay, so instead, Susan Ballard chose to do this in her capacity, personal capacity, to create a controversy where none exists and accept the full liability for violating the human rights of all that she personally threatened by listening to a foreign country in its violation of the law of nations. And I should, what should have been added in there, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because those little punks are over there in the equestrian order in their little house over there, giving orders from there and not doing anything themselves. They're handing out orders. So when it all comes down, guess what? They throw Susan Ballard under the bus and say, we never said that. And guess what? Susan Ballard was the one that did it. And they'd be right. So the second that the locals have their aspirations of ambition to become a FBI agent or to become a federal agent or something that's so important, think about it. You have to commit a crime in order to be a part of that? Come on, folks. Think.
Yeah, and I'd also like to remind people that the reason this is so twisted is because secret societies, in particular, the one we tend to focus on now is the Masonic lodges. They take inner oaths. Their oaths are to the society, not to government, not to a nation. It's to themselves. It's to their members. So anything that derives from them is self-serving for that membership, for that society.
That's called creating a state within a state.
And they use the locals as pawns to execute their orders.
Crimes. Yeah, they execute crimes. The crimes.
Right, crimes. And then hang them out to dry. Because that's why you have 33 degrees or, whatever it is in the Masonic Lodge. I believe it's 33, right? Because that's basically a hierarchy. And, up the chain of command, you become more valuable, etc. But, the lower levels, you're just a worker, expendable, first to go.
Absolutely. You're a nobody, and they execute. You're the first one they execute because you know too much. When they finally make their move to come into full power, which is what they're trying to do right now in Washington. They're moving pretty quick to try to get full power and everything else, but they've got to make sure that nothing comes back on them. So that's what seems to take so long, because they have to spend so much time hiding all the crimes. A lot of time invested in that. There's a lot of money spent on it, hiding crimes. The easiest way to do it is, when you got a country that's running a bunch of debt up, that's because the country they're using that money to cover crimes.
Yeah, and I think at this point, what's that cliche? Oh, the web we weave when we practice to deceive. At this point, here, the United States is, they're beyond repair. I mean, they now can go do nothing except weave more, illusion and hide crimes. They can't really repair it without huge dismantling of institutions. And I just don't know if they're prepared to do that.
I don't know. Well, we got the government of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Congratulations on the election. Thank you. We have a lot of good news there. We just came up with the Constitution for the American National Union of the United States of America. We have a lot of growth opportunity there. Continental dollar is still growing. More and more people are wanting to use it. And we have a lot of good news going on with the government itself. We've got a couple of new folks in the United States Congress assembled. They're raring and ready to go, and are well aware of the task at hand and what needs to be done. So there are people doing that, and there's nothing wrong with having more people to do that.
And the private attorney generals just met with some success.
Right.
It's an alternative, folks. It's an alternative that you should consider.
And really, it comes down to, when are you ready to do the right thing? That's really what it comes down to. And to continue to keep I mean, we pretty much discussed what it is and what's happening and all that. It's really a moral issue to a certain extent. When you're ready to just stand up and do the right thing. But it was for a lot of us. Just didn't want to be a part of that anymore. And if you don't want to be a part of it, there's a place to go that is not dealing with that corruption. The union is set up really nice, by the way. You can go to AmericanNationalUnion.com and sign up there. You can read the terms and conditions. It is a public union. It's not a private one where you're going to have all these corruption going on. It's a public one. So, it's structured through industries rather than states for now, and it's really it's attractive to do business there. There's a lot of autonomy. There's a lot of independence. There's a lot of self-governing within it, and you just have to read the Constitution that just came out to figure out how it's set up. It's really cool. But at any rate, thank you for listening to the 51st episode or broadcast of the T-roh Show. We do appreciate the likes. We do appreciate the subscriptions. We get a bunch of those. It's really growing pretty quick, and we do appreciate your listens. Now, when we brought out, I just wanted to say this. Remember when I brought up that we had 3,000 hits in Facebook and then like 470 on YouTube?
Yeah.
Now they brought the hits down to 268 in Facebook. So it wouldn't look so obvious. So on Facebook, it has like 200, I think this week or last week came with 230 hits or something like that on T-roh. So they stopped registering the hits there, so it wouldn't look so obvious between YouTube and Facebook if there was a problem with Facebook. So YouTube called Facebook and said, "Hey, man, make those numbers look good."
Yeah,
it's hilarious to watch what they do.
And I think that's a real occurrence, and I think most of the folks that are listening now, that if they've listened to 5-6 episodes of the T-roh Show, I think they're beginning to understand that almost probably everything that you encounter outside of your home is not what it appears to be. It's just not what it appears to be.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. We don't bring out a lot of it. We will in the future. We're going to be covering more on gaslighting. We'll be covering that in the next couple of weeks. And more on common purpose and how they operate, and the fact that they are trespassing on the postal Universal Postal Union and the postal system throughout the world. Not just the General Post Office; they're doing it to everybody. So there's more that needs to be done here, but it only takes a simple resident declaration. And I'm not telling you that because we're running out of resident declarations. Believe me, we get a lot of them. Okay, I'm just letting you know. I mean a lot of them every day and every other day. It's amazing how many we get. But we do appreciate it. Want to do one more shout out to the governor of Massachusetts. We do appreciate your assistance in this matter, and we'll see how far this goes with that case. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Enjoy your work week.